For almost 20 years working as a funeral director, I've learned that every culture carries its own death traditions, rituals that go far beyond a simple goodbye. I've witnessed funerals bound to ancient customs, symbols with deep meanings, and families mourning over secrets that will never be revealed. But nothing prepared me for the time I received the absurd order to dress a corpse in gold. Not just any gold, but solid, heavy, gleaming jewelry. A gold that seemed to carry a story beyond its physical touch. A shine that was both a shield and a curse. When the golden chains began to drape that cold body, I realized this wouldn't be an ordinary ritual. I, a man accustomed to death, felt a different kind of tension, an ancient fear that rooted itself in the air. No one warned me about the meaning behind those pieces, the truth the gold concealed, and the cost of not taking that tradition seriously. For years, I carried the weight of that ritual on my soul, reflecting on what I saw and felt that night when luxury became a trap, and shadows began to walk closer than they should. This isn't just a story about a funeral, it's an account of pacts, respect, and the consequences of ignoring ancient warnings. If you think you've seen all that death can bring, get ready. Because some traditions don't die, they haunt. They persist through time, flesh, and spirit. And when they resurface, no one is truly safe, not even a veteran funeral director. The time has come for me to share this story with you. A story that kept me awake and might keep you up too. It was an ordinary afternoon, colder than usual, when I received the call to prepare the body of an elderly man, a well-respected businessman whose death was natural, but whose request was clear. The deceased must be dressed in his finest clothes and adorned with gold, real heavy gold in great quantity. The family handed me a huge box, carefully packed, filled with chains, bracelets, rings, cuffs, even small ornamental pieces that seemed to be heirlooms from some distant time. The task was clear: make sure he departed for the afterlife wearing all of it, as if the gold were his final armor for the journey. At first, I treated it as a cultural tradition, a way for the family to honor their history. But soon I realized it wasn't just an act of pride or luxury. This gold, so heavy on the body, transmuted a meaning that went beyond the material. Each piece I placed on the body seemed to carry a dense energy, a vibration that passed through the cold skin and reached me, making my heart tighten inexplicably. I felt as if the deceased wasn't just being adorned for respect, but protected against something invisible and threatening. The wife quickly explained, in a nearly nervous whisper, that the gold had the power to ward off the shadows that had chased the man since his youth. It was a shield against forces that didn't belong in this world. I had no idea what she meant, and no one had ever warned me of what it really meant. As the jewelry sparkled under the cold light of the room, a silent electricity filled the air. I was in the presence of an older and weightier ritual than I had imagined, and my ignorance might soon cost me dearly. As I placed each necklace, each ring, each bracelet, the physical weight of the gold seemed to grow on my body, not only from gravity, but from the invisible fear that was starting to take shape. The other staff, used to so many deaths, avoided the embalming room. Some fled with trivial excuses, others simply looked away and carried on their way. Something about that golden burden unsettled them beyond the material spectre. The gold, meant to be an ornament, seemed to pulse, and I began to hear a faint tinkling, as if the deceased was still moving those jewels. There was no logic to such a perception, but the feeling spread, growing stronger as the ritual continued. As I dressed the body, I heard footsteps in the empty hallways and distant whispers, voices murmuring in languages that sounded ancient, profane. One night, long after the work should have been finished, I heard a metallic sound striking the window, followed by a whisper that seemed to call my name. The wife returned frequently to check on the progress of the ritual, always repeating that the gold was not just wealth, but sacred protection, that those pieces kept the shadows at bay, even after death. The weight of the gold extended beyond the body, into the heavy air, into my tormented thoughts, into a fear I couldn't explain. Something in the jewelry told me I shouldn't be there, that this was a ceremony with dangers only the ancestors understood. That night, the morgue closed under a deep aura of unease, and I alone heard whispers I could never decipher, as an invisible presence seemed to surround me, waiting for a misstep. When the day of the funeral arrived, the family showed up dressed in simple mourning with discreet jewelry, contrasting with the body inside, laden with heavy, dazzling gold. During the ceremony, unusual circumstances began to unfold. A draft of air moved through the chapel, illuminating the body, adorned theatrically. The shadow formed on the walls, a vague figure attempting to approach the coffin. Whispers echoed through the space, words I couldn't understand but full of anguish and warning. "He cannot leave." The grandson knew ancient words and held a golden cross while chanting songs that seemed to cross the veil of reality. In the shadows, the jewelry shimmered, and the gold meant for protection seemed to repel an invisible danger, a specter that lurked within the room. At the moment the body was placed in the coffin, a gold chain broke with a dry, deadly snap. The shadow withdrew, but the sense of threat remained, heavy as the gold that gleamed there. The funeral was not just a goodbye. It was a silent battle between worlds, where gold had become the last line of defense, and a grim reminder that this pact had a price too high. The next day, I received an urgent call. The tomb had been violated. The family's granddaughter, gripped by fear, described how the jewelry had vanished and strange marks covered the ground around it. When I arrived, I saw footprints that didn't appear human, traces that formed an indecipherable pattern in the wet earth. Other funerals in the area, also with bodies adorned in gold, had suffered similar events. Violations, mysterious disappearances, signs of spiritual pursuit. The gold, meant to keep the deceased safe, seemed to have triggered something beyond understanding. I knew that death adorned in luxury, in this case, was a gateway to dark secrets. A dark chapter many would prefer to forget. I felt my role in this story moving beyond the boundaries of mortality. I was no longer just a caretaker of the dead, but a witness to forces that defy reason. Today, I study relentlessly these traditions that seem to carry more fear than respect. I feel that gold is not just wealth, but a pact with forces we don't comprehend. I ask you who are listening, would you have the courage to face this mystery? Do you believe that the wealth of death can attract invisible horrors? If you've made it this far, comment "but gold" and tell me if you know of any funeral tradition weighed down by something far beyond the apparent. Because often, what shines on the surface hides the true fear that walks beside us, even after death arrives.